Welcome back to the Eurobox, presented by me, Lenny Rubin. And today I'm joined by Joseph Terry. And today we'll be talking about Group E.
Yeah, so excuse me, Lenny, but great to be back on the Eurobox for the great media company that is outside the box as well. I'm looking forward to getting involved in small productions over the Euros period potentially. And yeah, Group E is interesting because you've got some teams in here that you might not have paid too much attention to during the qualification campaign, Slovakia and Romania, who had some really interesting campaigns themselves. And then you've got Ukraine and Belgium. Ukraine, a side that always punch above their weights, and Belgium, a side that are currently have to deal with the first major tournament they've had without a lot of their big players in that squad. Of course, without Thibaut Courtois in that squad, they'll be relying on a new person in between the sticks and in defence as well. You've got lots of some new names as well coming in to replace the old guard. So it's a super interesting group, this. Even if it's a group maybe not many people have been looking at very often, it's still going to be tight, I think, potentially for that second place spot, which is up in the air with Ukraine's form being so inconsistent. And it is an interesting case to look at because kind of you are looking right there at a Slovakian side back in the Euros, first obviously 2016, I believe. Same thing goes for Romania. Belgium, of course, who were coming off of the disastrous 2022 World Cup in Qatar, got knocked out in the group stages. And then Ukraine as well, who have becoming a genuine outsider in European football, able to get results.
Yes, as you said, Belgium coming back from this loss in the Euros, going out in the group stages, but will they be looking to come back with probably one of the strongest forward setups they have in this tournament with Romelu Lukaku, Trossard, Carrasco, Luka Bakio, Openda Doku, the Atalanta winger let me get this correctly, D Kete Lare, if I said that right, and Bakayoko, if I didn't say that before, Bakayoko from PSV. When I'm looking at this, their forwards, they are looking for this. That could be the standout in this tournament. That forwards, if they get it correctly and play the right three, they could strive in this tournament.
They really could. They really could strike gold in the Euros. Lukaku has come back after, I think, what is probably the most embarrassing loan period, most embarrassing transfer. Romelu Lukaku to Chelsea. He had a great season at Inter Milan, managed to drag them all the way, probably farther than anyone expected them to go in the Champions League. And Lukaku's been firing goals like it's nothing. He's going to be amazing. He's going to be in that key attacking partnership. You've got Bakayoko, who's a great young player coming through. Jeremy Doku. I mean, people talk a lot about De Bruyne and Rodri being the powerhouse that Man City side, and I'm going to say it's Jeremy Doku. One-on-one, there is nobody better in that Man City side than Jeremy Doku. And I've got just so much respect for his on-the-ball skills and on-the-ball touch. Yannick Carrasco as well, a player that maybe doesn't get the attention he deserves, given that he's out playing at an Atletico Madrid side that aren't really doing as much these days as they were a few years ago. It is a stacked forwards line, but it's probably trying to counteract a weaker midfield and defensive setup. They might go far in the Euros, but I don't think it'll be through defense. I think it'll be through the fact that they can score more goals than other people can. That sort of says it itself, is that Carrasco is a solid striker and a solid forward who's had a great experience and a great career playing in the Liga. But have you seen any of him in the last year? No, I haven't.
Now moving on to the midfield, obviously they've got arguably the strongest midfielder in the world, Kevin De Bruyne in their squad. And how do you feel he's going to stand out in that squad, being basically their centerpiece that they build around?
He is the centerpiece. He is the crown jewel behind that squad for Belgium, and he always is going to be. You look at the rest of that midfield setup, and it's not exactly jumping out to me as a world class midfield. You've got Trossard in that side, and Trossard will be starting games because Trossard is a very strong player, and Trossard, well, end of the day, is always going to be able to pull out performances when he needs to. He's shown that a lot when it's come to Arsenal this year. Of course, the big name that's missing out of the setup is that sort of out and out defensive sort of gem. You've got Axel Witsel there. He's going to play more attacking football. You've got Amadou Onana, who's managed to come inside after being, I think, one of the best players for Everton all season. probably, it has to be said. You've got a return as well of Yuri Tielemans. He's spent the year at Aston Villa, hasn't really had the chance to, I suppose, prove his skill and talent as much as Aston Villa as you would if you weren't surrounded by great midfielders and great strikers and great forwards like he has been this year with Matty Cash in defensive midfield defence and also with Ollie Watkins up front for Villa. It's a bit of an underpowered midfield. You've got Asta Ranks, he's at Wolfsburg, but it's not jumping out to me as a particularly strong setup. Oral Mangala's been doing well for Lyon, but again, that Lyon side has struggled to form at times this year and has also not been great at scoring goals. So I think most of the goals are going to be scored through that forward setup, like we said earlier on.
Amadou Onana, as you mentioned before, amazing midfielder, amazing music artist, making a song with Alex Iwobi earlier in the season. I feel like I'm up with a shout out there. He could be that standout player in the Euros. You know how we always have one player that stands out amongst the rest? I feel like Amadou Onana will be that player.
And I wouldn't be surprised either. Amadou Onana has been a great player, and he's really shown his skill in that team, because that's that team and that side he's been playing for at Everton. It's not exactly a strong side, and 2 goals over the season for a midfielder in an Everton side that has struggled to score goals at times despite a late resurgence as Dominic Calvert-Lewin has started to get back into form is great form. And he's been consistently getting game time over the last 3-4 years in top divisions. He was at Hamburg, he was at Lille, and then he was moving to Everton, moving to Merseyside. I think he's got the chance of going really far. And in this group, I think there are some goals. There is a real goal fest in this group, particularly against maybe a side like Romania that will probably be struggling for confidence. So for Amadou Onana, does what he's meant to, and I think it's a well-deserved call up to the Belgium squad.
Yes, I agree. Very, very well deserved caller. Now moving on to the defense of Belgium, very aging defense. We've got Axel Witsel, Jan Vertonghen, Munayer, who's at Trabzonspor now. You've got a few younger players coming up. You got De Bast, around our age, he's 20 years old. And you got Thiat from Rennes, Wood Face from Leicester, and Castagne, who's, if I'm not wrong, also part of the aging defense, that also part of that golden generation, as we mentioned in our talk about Group B. This squad is going in they are the aging golden generation. They've got rid of some of the guys, but some of the core of that golden generation is still there.
Some of the core is still there. So the core is obviously Jan Vertonghen. He's now at Anderlecht in the Belgian First Division, and also Timothy Castagne. He's still there, as well as Thomas Meunier, who, I mean, Trabzonspor have had a pretty shocking season in the Super League. They were nowhere near Besiktas, and they were nowhere near Galatasaray and Fenerbahce in the battle for that league title. But he's still going to be there. So they've still got that central hub. It's not exactly screaming confidence to me, though. Wout Faes has been on and off for the whole of the championship season, and he's also prone to a pretty bad mistake when he wants to make one. Jan Vertonghen, again, I mean, he's getting on. He's 37 now, and he's picked up injuries in the final 2 league games of the season in May. This will probably be his final tournament, which might give him a bit more impetus, a bit more inspiration, but I'm also not exactly sold that Jan Vertonghen is going to be a game-changing player. I think the key players to look out for are going to be Arthur Theate, who's been at Stade Rennais for the year, and Zeno De Bast is interesting to see, because he's going to be, I suppose, that pet project coming forward to try and build that new defensive star. It'll probably be Vertonghen's last Euros, and maybe he's going to try to take his position, although Arthur Theate is going to be knocking on the door to try and get into the team as well. In defence, yes, I'm slightly nervous. Timothy Castagne has been shipping goals for fun at Fulham all season. Let's be honest about that. About Faes, Leicester haven't been exactly the strongest team in defence in Championship, and it's quite easy to defend against Championship. It's mostly just sit back and don't let them get past your defensive line. So, yes, I think this might be the issue, is that when they come to the knockout rounds and they face a properly solid side, they might get undone quite quickly, which is why I don't have that much hope for Belgium in this Euros.
I feel very opposite for you compared to you in this tournament. I feel Belgium could go far because primarily that forward setup could be what carries them. That defense will mess them up maybe later towards the tournament, and especially with the aging defense they have with Jan Vertonghen. Not his sidekick, Alderweireld isn't in this tournament, but Jan Vertonghen still has his longevity to stay in these tournaments. But I feel like they could crash out because of the lack of threat in the defense.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is if you look at the form for Belgium, the form's looking great. 2 wins and 2 draws in the friendlies. 0-0 against Ireland, not exactly spectacular. 2 against the English side, and it was a fairly full strength English side from both sides. Really, I mean, in that game, the starting backline was Théate, Vertonghen, De Bast, and Castagna. So maybe that's where they will be heading towards, in front line of Trossard, Lukaku, and Doku. Trossard playing on that left wing position. So essentially, they'll play around with it slightly. I can see why, though, you're backing on the attack to try and get through.
Now moving on to Romania, a newer squad towards the Euros. If I'm not wrong, will this be one of their first Euros that they played?
It's their second. The first one was in 2016 in France.
So they're going into the Euros. Personally, with some talent there. Dragusin from Tottenham Hotspur, formerly of Genoa. Would you like to speak more about Dragusin?
Dragusin's been great this year. Dragusin has really been a key part to that Spurs setup, and he's got lots of game time, it has to be said, as well. Again, clean. Just only yellow cards, off 9 games. Of course, he came in later on towards the season. He was on the bench for most games, but when he's come on, he's nearly played a full 19 every single time. So he isn't starting games. When I say he's got a lot of game time, he's got a lot of game time for when he's been able to get a lot of game time. So I think that's certainly good to see. Of course, he was at Genoa before that at the start of the season. Then he moved, again, over the whole season, 28 appearances in league games, 2 goals over the season, 1 assist, only 2 yellow cards. That's a key thing as well, is that a lot of these players are going to be yellow card happy. Dragusin's nowhere near yellow card happy, only 22. And he is the star player in this team for the Romanians. You've got some other names in that defence. They're playing at good sides. I look at a player like Andrei Ratiu, he's at Rayo Vallecano. And also, you look at a player like Raku Ionut, who's at Palermo in Serie B. There are some players in there that could potentially show up. Is the issue they're going to face is that basically, with the exception of Dragusin, none of these players are at top level clubs. There are a few players at Parma, Dennis, and Valentin up front, but in terms of that big game experience, that won't be there for this squad, which could be a potential issue.
I agree. The squad isn't looking the strongest, but when it comes to the Euros, anything can happen. The sides we don't expect, they just can prevail in this tournament. But moving forward into their midfield, one player that stands out is Romanian legend son. Let me say his name right. Hagi. I'll just say Hagi, as in Romanian legend Hagi's son, Yanis Hagi, who had a few good years at Rangers, but is currently at Deportivo Alaves on loan. Will he be a standout in this competition possibly for that Romanian side?
Certainly, for the Romanian side, he is the standout. He's got that backing and he's got that background in the Scottish Premiership. Great player. And he will probably be leading the setup and leading that Romanian team. He played 65 minutes in the last friendly against Liechtenstein, who's playing all season for Deportivo Alaves. Yes, he is going to be the key player in that setup. Everyone else is essentially playing at either subpar sides or sides that you're not really expecting to give you that competitive edge against, even though he's playing for a lower league La Liga side. He's still playing for a La Liga side. It's not like, for example, Alexandru, who's been at Konyaspor mid-table or even lower table for the Turkish Super League. You're looking at Sut Adrian. He's at Steaua Bucharest. Again, the home biggest club in Romania. But again, no one really is going to be respecting the Romanian league in terms of the form. So yes, it's going to be Hagi who's going to be the biggest player for that setup. And this is where the issue is going to come from Romania. Is it's going to be relying on 1 or 2 players. In this case, it's going to be, well, Hagi and Dragusin.
I feel Romania, they could pull off a shock, but looking at their squad going into this tournament, especially looking at their form in the last 4 games, they've lost 1 against Romania. Sorry, no, not again. They didn't lose them. So sorry, let me say that again. going into this tournament, looking at their form in the last 4 games, they've lost one against Colombia and drawn 1-1 to Northern Ireland, 0-0 to Bulgaria, and 0-0 to Liechtenstein. So going to this tournament is not looking the best, but possible upsets they could pull off against Ukraine in their first game, and maybe even against Belgium in their second game of the tournament.
Potentially, the form isn't looking great. I think you're spot on there. 1-1 to Northern Ireland, and if you look a bit at the figures there, 9 attempts on goal over the whole game, almost more than double what Northern Ireland had, but only 3 on goal. So it's looking like finishing their chances will be the big issue. Again, you look at Romania, Liechtenstein. Romania with 35 attempts on goal, 12 on target. No, 35 goal attempts, 12 on target, 62% possession, 0-0 to Liechtenstein. So the issues might be in terms of converting those great chances that they're making.
Now moving on to Ukraine. Ukraine going into this tournament had to go through the Euro qualification process in terms of the knockouts, and they beat Iceland to go through into the tournament. Iceland obviously just beating England a few days ago. So Ukraine going into this tournament, they had to qualify through the knockout process, but going to this tournament, could there be a threat towards Belgium, and could they make it out of the groups?
They could be a threat to Belgium. They certainly can be a threat because this squad that they're bringing is a much stronger squad than lots of people are looking at it as. And it's certainly a stronger squad, I think, at points than Belgium, which is ridiculous to say. But if you look at the talent, and also you look at the leagues they're playing in compared to Belgium, there's a real chance Ukraine could top this group. And again, they had to do it the hard way. They nearly beat Italy. They nearly got past Italy in that same group, that group of death, you can call it, with England, Ukraine, and Italy all in the same qualification group. They managed to get through it in the end, and also managed to get through those qualifiers, as you said, getting past, in the end, Bosnia and Iceland. Both, well, one at home and one away from home. So showing the skill wasn't just based on the home advantage. I think they've got a real chance just looking through that squad as it is. I mean, in between the sticks, it's going to be Andriy Lunin, the super sub for Real Madrid this year, and I think one of the best on-form young goalkeepers that we're seeing in European football. He's going to be starting, which is interesting to see because, of course, that's a new name in the setup. In defence, lots of players from Shakhtar Donetsk. We're going to see that real core players, but you've got players like Vitaly Mikalenko, who's been consistently playing Premier League football for the last 2 years. Ilya Zabrany, who's been playing at Bournemouth about 6-7 months. And also, of course, Alexander Zinchenko, who's been the crucial player for that Arsenal side that nearly won the league this year in the Premier League. Their backline is incredibly strong, including goalkeeper. I think this might be a tournament where we might not see as many goals being scored, but we're going to see Ukraine keep a lot more clean sheets than most other teams in the tournament.
Andriy Lunin has had the outstanding Champions League season this year. Unfortunately, didn't start the final, but he will be looking forward to playing that goalkeeper role in the Ukraine side going into the Euros. But we're looking more at the forwards. They're bringing quite a strong set of forwards with 2 Hirona players in the form of Dobiek and Tiskanov, if I pronounced their names correctly. Apologies if I haven't. And Mikhailo Mudryk. So that attack is looking quite threatening already with the 2 Hirona link up going on up front.
It is. It's looking strong. And if Mudryk can get his firing boots on, there is a strong chance we might see goals for the Chelsea player who's been mercilessly mocked for the last year and a half for maybe the worst transfer we've seen in a very long time out of Chelsea. In terms of Dovbyk, he's been great at Girona. Girona, of course, was a side that nearly challenged the Kings for the La Liga title earlier on this season. And also just other players on that side. You've got an older name, but a more experienced name in Andrei Yarmolenko, who's been continuing to play for Dynamo Kyiv in the Ukrainian Premier League. So it's a super interesting attack to look because that attack is going to be leading the line. Just moving on to the midfield, I'm not seeing standout players in that setup. And I think it's going to be the issue we're going to see is that players like Mudryk, players like Dovbyk and Yarmolenko, also Roman Yaremchuk, who's been at Valencia for the last year, even though Valencia's season was up and down. I think it's going to be an issue of can they get the ball to them in time, because the midfield is looking like the weak point in this Ukraine team.
That is a good point. We've got one standout talent in the midfield in the form of Malinovsky. He's been quite a good player for Genoa this season. But other than that, we're looking at a midfield side that could be easily targeted and used against them when they play against sides like Belgium, when they play against Belgium, or even by Romania or Slovakia. So it's the
Mm.
midfield's looking like the weak point for Ukraine.
It is again, depending on where you play. Zigankov, you might play up front, you might play midfield. We don't know. And of course, you've got Malinovsky as well, who's been at Genoa this year. Yeah, this midfield is looking like the weak point, and it's going to be interesting to see how teams deal with that. In that, do they try to overload that midfield and try to play diamond football, for example, try to draw the players in so the defense gets caught as well, or are you just going to try lob it over their heads if you're attacking and try go straight to your forwards? It's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that in terms of the formation as well. Do you go defensive and play five at the back and then play with three in the midfield? I mean, I'll just have a quick look at the formation that they played last time against Moldova, and they were playing a 4-4-2 formation with Zigankov on the right wing. Mudryk was playing on midfield on the left, and he had Stepanenko and Shaparenko. So potentially they might go for a four in the middle, but I can see them trying to minimize the space that's used in the middle and try to exploit the wings a lot with Mudryk and with Zigankov. So it might make the midfield play a bit more difficult to understand at first, because it looks like they'll be essentially trying to totally void the midfield, almost make it like a 6-2-2 formation, if that makes sense.
Now moving on to Slovakia, they probably have two of the best defenders in the competition with Skriniar and David Hanko. Hanko has had probably one of his best seasons of his career at Feyenoord. Looking into our squad, are there any other standout talents in that squad to you, Joseph?
Well, in all honesty, not particularly. I mean, Martin Dubravka's in that setup. Martin Dubravka was the consistent starter for Newcastle for, I want to say, 4 or 5 years, actually, because he was there in the championship era as well. And then he got deposed. He was taken off his throne by Nick Pope as he came into the setup, and then later by Loris Karius when Dubravka was cup tied for the Carabao Cup final. So he's going to be there, but again, he can only really do what he can in between the sticks. In all honesty with you, there aren't really many other names jumping out at me. And I think that's the big issue, is that back in the day, Slovakia did have that great name of Martin Skrtel in their backline. And you knew he was going to provide Premier League quality for Liverpool legend. And you're not really seeing those names anymore. They're playing in good leagues. They're playing in the Belgian division. They're playing for sides like, for example, Napoli with Stanislav Lobotka as well. They're playing in good sides, but I genuinely cannot tell you much about these players. And normally, if you're a good player, with the exception of Skriniar, who's always going to stand out, you need to prove almost that you're worth the hype. So Slovakia, I think, for everybody is going to be an incredibly unknown quantity, and I don't quite know what to think.
Looking into Slovakia's form in the last 4 games, they've lost one against Austria, but Austria, we'll speak about them later in the show when we go through their group. But other than that, 1-1 against Norway, 4-0 against San Marino. By the way, a 1-1 against Norway against a side that had Haaland and Sola, two of the most informed strikers in the world. But other than that, when we're looking at the teams they played, 4-0 against San Marino. San Marino, a side that a lot of teams put large amounts of goals through. But look at the last game they played, 4-0 against Wales. Wales, not the strongest side currently, but 4-0 against Wales going into this tournament, 2 4-0 wins. That could put them into a good place going into their first game against Belgium, which we'll now speak about.
Yes, definitely, certainly could. And also distributing those goals well within that Slovakian side, one for Bosnik, one for Kuska in the midfield, and also being helped by an own goal as well as another goal on top of that from the subs bench. The other goal coming from Benes, the Hamburg forward. Yeah, I think in terms of Slovakia, it's going to be about making the chances count. You look at the stats of that game, and 14 attempts on goal, 8 on target. So this is this is what they need to try to be doing is they need to be hitting at least 50% because they're not going to be making as many chances as I think other sides in the team. 11 attempts against Norway, only 2 on target. So that consistency in terms of on target is going to be key. In terms of that first game then of the tournament itself, I think very interesting game because for Belgium, they'll want to set the tone early on and prove that they are genuinely there to be the team that might actually win the whole group, which I think is fair to say is what they will be aiming for, and it's what many people watching the games are going to be expecting. They're going to be expecting a win for the Belgian side. So it's going to be interesting how they respond to that. Are they going to pile the pressure on the other teams, and are they going to go big at Slovakia, or are they going to want to try and conserve energy and just get a win by maybe 2 goals for the goal difference sake as well? You've got that, and then you've also got Romania versus Ukraine, and Ukraine have got to win this game if they've got any chance of getting second. For Romania, it's been a free hit because, again, no one really expects much from them. Are Ukraine going to have to put in a shift in terms of goal difference and try and really put pressure on Belgium potentially in this first week? Belgium, Slovakia, I think Belgium will win in the end, maybe by 2 goals. I can see Ukraine getting 3 past Romania. And that's going to be very interesting in terms of the goal difference battle of who might get first, because I think there is a world where we see both sides getting potentially 7 points, both sides beating Romania and Slovakia, and then potentially drawing against each other in the game that they play against each other in the final game week. I can see that happening. So it might come down to goal difference.
I think so too. This is another one of the groups where you could possibly see the third place team going through, because it's very, apart from Belgium, it's a very equal 3. So I would say when it comes to the Belgium's first game against Slovakia, I feel like it could be, even if you have Hanko, who's probably one of the best defenders in Europe right now, at Feyenoord, who stood out and is probably going to get a big move come this next transfer window. I feel like Belgium are still going to win by like 2-0, 3-0, possibly in this game. And then when it comes to the Ukraine versus Romania game, I feel like that could end up being a 1-1, maybe a 0-0. That could be one of those games that just doesn't stand out in the competition.
Yeah, I can see that also being true. I just think that Ukraine are going to want to put a statement win out there, and I think Ukraine will want to try and go far in this tournament since they got to they managed to get to the knockouts in Euro 2020, and then they got knocked out fairly swiftly by England. So I think they'll want to try and prove them wrong, because actually, if you look at the qualified tournament, they deserve to be in the tournament. They were only a point away from Italy in the end. They're a strong side with a strong squad. So I'm going to give Romania a bit less hope. And also, I don't think the third place team is going to qualify out of this in the best 4 thirds, because I can't see there being a point where one of these teams gets a win and also gets a draw. I think this is going to be 7-7 at the top and 3 for third. And I don't think 3 points will be enough for you to qualify in the round of 16 unless you've got a really strong goal difference, which they might have against a team like Romania. I think that's something to bear in mind.
It's a good point. It's a good point. But thank you for coming on today for episode Group E, not episode of Group E, but Group E's episode. But I've been Lenny. I've been joined today by Joseph. Thank you for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and if you're on streaming platforms, make sure to follow and drop a 5-star rating. Thank you for listening.